We have the distinct pleasure today of having a chat with Don Moore and Peter Waddell. Both Don and Peter have worked for many years for the city, particularly Don, who goes back so far in the recreation department of the city that he almost matches my father. I can remember Father, after the war, working with the city to start what was called the Athletic Association. And a number of things came out of that, but eventually came enough persuasion to get the city to hire a chap by the name of Jarvis Miller.
Yes.
You may remember the name.
Certainly do.
Or certainly his son, Kirk Miller,
That's right.
who went on to join us in university and become an architect. But today we'll focus to the extent we can on the life, the recreational life of the community of Red Deer and how it's evolved and grown over the years, and some of the facilities that we now have that support it. So I wonder, Don, if you'd tell us a couple of things about how you get into the recreational field and more particularly, how you came to Red Deer.
Well, I dropped out of high school and went to work in a sporting goods store in Calgary. And
Are you originally from Calgary then?
yeah. And when we decided to come to Red Deer, I found a position similar to what I had in Calgary. I was the assistant manager of the store in Calgary. And when I came to Red Deer, I managed the builder's hardware sporting goods. So I continued on with sporting goods for a couple of years in Red Deer when things started to open up a little bit. And I got involved in the community in a number of different ways. I taught skiing, I taught fishing, and I just enjoyed team sports and coached most team sports. And the ad came out, and the other thing that helped my cause a little bit was I was a member of the Recreation Board as a citizen.
In Red Deer.
In Red Deer.
Used to be roughly what year then, Don?
Oh,
Be in the 1950s.
Yeah, be 56, I guess. Yeah, we came to Red Deer in 54, and I was with Builders Hardware for about 2 years. And when the opportunity to join Jarvis Miller as an assistant, I was very fortunate having had the experience that I had as a volunteer. And back in those days, there was no degree in recreation. There was, most recreation people were physical ed background. And I guess my background, because I had no formal education, my background as a volunteer was where I got to know Jarvis very well, and he thought I'd be a good applicant, so I became the assistant at that time.
And what were recreational activities or facilities as organized by the city like? What was the range of them, and how involved was the city?
Well, it was the only act. There was very little else. There was an athletic association, and some very familiar names back then, but they won't come to me immediately. Dr. Parsons was the secretary at one point in time. I inherited his short notes and things that are part of my archives. And I think your dad was involved at that time. But then the local businessmen were the blood life of the community, and they were the ones that organized the recruitment of a person to head this new thing up. And there was an interest in the YMCA at that time. And it gradually changed. When they hired Jarvis, it was questionable exactly who he was going to serve. But then the city took it on, and he became the first recreation. No, I believe there was maybe one other earlier person, but Jarvis was the original, pretty much. And
what were the programs and activities that got started at that time?
well, the one that was really kind of exciting is the playground program. They had playground directors in every neighborhood center, and in some cases a couple of people. These were all young students, all high school pretty much, maybe the odd university, but there was, I think, a staff of about 30. No, there wouldn't have been 30. There'd been maybe 25 that served a purpose. And at that point in time, they kind of patterned it after what was going on in Calgary and Edmonton. They were already in that kind of business, and Jarvis had limited background in public recreation, but it was an excellent start for the department, and picked up where the community more or less left off, because there was a changeover in the minor hockey and minor baseball, those kind of sports. And I'm in trouble.
Well, I can fill in a little bit, and perhaps Peter can too. About 1951, the Kinsman Club took on the challenge of buying the equipment for and building those playgrounds. Mm-hmm. And I think did about 11 or 13 of them around the community, because we used to have to go out with Dad and the members of the club and do things like sow grass and put up some of the structures. So that would be about 1951-ish, 52, 53 maybe, when they put those together. I didn't realize that there was community groups or teams that backed them up to get more use out of them, but they were certainly large. The city had set aside a significant amount of property to create or locate these playgrounds. But that was one of the starting points. I suppose the other was that, I was at an age where you could get involved in some of the starting to be organized baseball and hockey, and depending on the season, activities that the community was sponsoring, and there were competitions being set up with different areas within the community. So that would be about the time that you started.
Yeah, I think so. The school system at the time was involved in quite extensive. But we had a simple method of organizing the community, and it was a foolscap in every classroom, and a place for the boys and girls to write their names. And they were categorized then, and they became neighborhood-based hockey teams, baseball teams, softball teams, and that kind of thing.
As I recall, it was right about that time that the city became involved in its first major recreational project, and that was to build the arena. And I'm guessing that would be about, what, 52, 53, somewhere in there. So that would have just opened. As I know that because the curling rink got built right beside it. And there was a controversy over who was going to pay for the curling rink and who was going to pay for the artificial plant. And the cost came in too high for the city's budget. So the curling rink had to build its own building. And another chap that was involved in, I think, the early days there was a chap named Alex Sim. His name still carries on in the Sims furniture in the community, but Alec was very involved in a lot of projects in the community. He and I think his brother Keith were auctioneers up on the North Hill. But they were involved in completing the curling rink. And became a bit of a controversy because years later, ice kept coming off the arena and bashing rather badly the curling rink, to which Mike Day said, "That's your mistake. You've built it too close." And I said, "No, that's your mistake because you wouldn't build it." Anyway, both facilities, of course, are brand new and after a good 50 years of existence. But that would have been one of the early buildings. I mean, there was an arena before that, the old galvanized arena down on Ross Street that the Rotary Club had actually and others had helped build way back in the 20s. So there was some recreational interest, willingness, and some funding on the behalf of the city. But I remember my father saying it really didn't get serious until they hired somebody, and that was Jarvis Miller or the chap before him. For a moment, if I could just move to Peter. Peter, I don't think it's a fair question to ask you when you came to Red Deer and how and why you stayed, because of course you were born here.
That's right.
But maybe you'd like to go over not just how you ended up here, but maybe how your family did briefly, and then how you ended up coming back to Red Deer and the city of Red Deer.
Well, fate had lots to do with all of this, and I'm sure with Don as well, in all our lives. But Dad was in the Air Force and recruiting. He was a medical officer. Dad joined the Air Force in the early days, just after he graduated from the University of Toronto, and spent some time in Europe during the war in England, and then ended up in Edmonton, and then to Red Deer to recruit in the recruiting process for new pilots. I guess to replace the ones that had died.
Part of the Commonwealth, they were training plan at Benholm.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. There were young pilots from all over the Commonwealth. And you probably remember the Harvards flying over the city when we were young, eh? And they made that crack that, I don't know what did that, but it was a very distinctive whine and growl of the Harvards. But Dad was stopped or interviewed on the platform at the railway station by Dr. Bill Parsons, and they were looking for new doctors for the Parsons Clinic.
This would be
1944.
44.
Yeah.
Well, the Parsons Clinic had just opened.
Brand new.
And as I recall, that was the year that Dr. Richard Parsons passed away.
Yes.
So
Right.
There was McGregor Parsons and Bill Parsons,
That's-
but they lost their father.
Right. And Dad was from Peterborough and rather stayed conservative, old school atmosphere. And Dad was attracted to the vivaciousness and activity and entrepreneurship and opportunities that Alberta offered young people, especially. And after the war, it was the baby boom, and I was a product of that. Dad got home in early 46, I guess, and I was born, or end of 45, and I was born 9 months later, along with Toby and a whole bunch of people, Keith Holmes and all the guys I grew up with and went to school with. There was that big baby boom, and so Red Deer's been my home all my life. I remember Don very well from his days at Builders Hardware before he became part of the rec department, and for a couple of very good reasons, because of the sporting connection. And Mr. Moore was involved with so much of that activity in Red Deer, but I distinctly remember being taught skiing by Mr. Moore in the Red Deer, in the central schoolyard playground there. You know, there's that little slope down from the schools down into the playfield.
Yeah.
It was that slope, believe it or not, where I had my first ski lesson, and Mr. Moore was the coach and the instructor, and then over the years I played baseball and tag or touch football and hockey, and Mr. Moore was my hockey coach for I don't know how many years, quite a few, and so I've really known him most of my life, if not all my life. I can't tell it. I can't tell you how much I remembered of Don when I was 2 and 3 years old, but after that I would have met him buying hockey sticks at Builders Hardware, and then his direct influence in these other sports, and interesting enough, Bob, how I ended up coming back to Red Deer. I was gone for 22 years or so. I tried my hand at becoming a doctor too, but I didn't last very long. I was only 2 years at the University of Calgary, and I knew it wasn't my forte or avenue, and so I went traveling the world for a couple of years, and then I came back, and I ended up going to NAIT, and I took forestry with a parks and recreation option. And then I ended up working in provincial parks, and Waskesiu Park was then, this is in the early 80s, and Waskesiu Park was flying along and developing at a rapid rate, and I got a phone call one day from Mr. Don Moore. I was stationed at Gull Lake at Aspen Beach, and Don phoned me and said, you know, there's going to be a vacancy coming up in Waskesiu Park, and the rest is history. I ended up following that avenue and made a jump from provincial parks to Red Deer Parks and Recreation. And I think I was with the city for 22 years then before I retired. So there's fate for you.
Good choice.
Yeah.
Good offer.
That was.
Good timing.
Yeah. No, and I remember it very well, and I've been very grateful and thankful ever since that I've had those opportunities before becoming involved directly with the city. And I remember very well playground, the playground structure and that inter-sport connection, because we were in Waskesiu and we had the Waskesiu playground, and we spent countless hours in that playground, winter and summer. Started playing baseball on that little diamond right in the southwest corner as soon as the snow melted. And then as soon as the ice could be made, and it was just a snowbank rink. We never had any boards. But I ended up playing scrimmage and just fun hockey almost every day with guys like Bill Caton and Pat Hanzik and Bob Carter and Bill Rogers, all these strong athletic people that became my friends, and all we had to do was walk down our back alley to the playground. So I have very fond memories of that too. And then of course, watching the arena come and how Red Deer has progressed so magnificently or expansively in the whole recreation and facility amenities that we have in Red Deer.
Don, to catch up to Peter's time coming back to Red Deer, there's a period in the 60s and 70s where there was significant recreational development in Red Deer, which to me must mean that there was a willingness on the part of the city or the city fathers to fund it, because it involved certainly a lot of structures which got increasingly expensive, but there also was a demand from the community for those services and a willingness to use them, making it a good decision. But can you take us through those 20 years? I know that one of the things that occurred or developed was the Michener Center, albeit on government property and part of the PDS, Provincial Training School. It still provided significant recreational opportunities for students and sports enthusiasts in Red Deer. But can you take us through that 20-year period?
I guess one of the major changes was in the sports. And the way that occurred, we would get a list from the schools of the boys that wanted to play hockey. No hockey for girls. And the boys were then my responsibility to determine how it should be structured and how it would evolve. So the first decision made was that it should be neighborhood oriented. So all the boys from Waskesiu played for the Waskesiu team. The boys from the East Hill, which was a very, very low population at that time,
Very new.
would be put on that team. Then the next responsibility was to find leadership for the sports, whatever sports there was. And the recruitment of citizens for the sports coaching role was the next responsibility, and we also had to work on the officiating and that kind of thing. So it was just totally recreation department organization to put that together. Up until then, there'd always been a midget team, a bantam team, a juvenile team, and the rest just fell by the wayside. But the expansion was really interesting and exciting. We involved a whole lot of people because every team needed a coach, of course, and so then we had to raise some money through service clubs and other sources. So we had uniforms for the teams, but the uniforms after a time became part and parcel of a little community center. And one of the first was on the East Hill, the first little community center at that time. And all the equipment was organized there, and gradually the whole thing grew and evolved. And then there was an apparent need for the more competitive kids that wanted a little different opportunity. And the recreation department took responsibility for setting that up. And then it was farmed out to the community, and some of the more notable coaches would include Eddie Wiseman, a Boston Bruins famous hockey player, and those kinds of things. I'm a little stuck there, but
So the community became, as it enlarged, grew up, you basically, I won't say segmented it, but you promoted sports in different areas, and then they competed in a community-wide program.
Mm-hmm.
That was a change from when I went through, because I went through, there might have been one of, and it was a pyramid system. If you were good enough, you got promoted. If you weren't, you were in the stands.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, we tried to make it all inclusive. We tried to make sure every kid was given the opportunity to develop as far as their skills and money would hold out.
How did you separate out what the community supported through the city and what the schools did on an extracurricular basis? Was it just a kind of a tacit agreement, or did you select one sport versus another?
Well, I guess what happened when the Recreation Board was established, the schools kind of backed off and allowed what little staff we had, Jarvis and I, would oh dear. Sorry, Bob.
Well, I mean, I think what you're saying is that the community took over, the city took over a number of the activities and helped organize them. Although there was, and it becomes an increasing the obvious characteristic of Red Deer, there was significant volunteer help, participation, and that allowed those programs to grow.
The playground program was a major venture, and the girls were hired at 75 cents an hour.
To supervise them?
Whether they needed it or not. And the provincial government was instrumental in putting leadership development programs together. So all these youngsters that were hired were then trained by hosting provincial-sponsored leadership development kinds of things, and tried to cover every conceivable type of recreation, including arts and crafts and sports and games, and but nothing very competitive. It was just a mass participation attempt that was really quite simple and quite efficient.
I was just thinking as you were chatting, Don, that I think it's in 1949, the city built their first pool. I think it was on Ross Street or 49th, just not far from here.
No.
But that was a pool only.
Yeah.
And I can remember going down there, and they would. It was hard to get in because it was such a demand. There were set hours and so on when you could come, or there was general swimming or whatever. But the city, and I don't know the year, decided to build a larger recreation center and built the one that's, let me call it downtown for lack of a better name, but the one that's there now. It's been renovated, expanded a few times, but I don't know when that was built, but it clearly was well after the downtown pool.
Well, that was 62.
Ended. 62? Okay.
And the downtown pool was a stone's throw from City Hall at that time. And it was a bargain when it was developed. The price was right. And it became a real focus of the summer program. And the Recreation Department, this is just about the time I started, and we organized learn to swim classes at all levels. And it was under the name of the Advocate Learn to Swim program. And also got involved in the aquatic sports, including competitive swimming. There was about that early, I think, there was a swim club, the Catalina Swim Club, took part. We never got into some of the water polo was never provided, never offered. Synchronized swimming was later, but it was all under the leadership of the Recreation Department. And it was a major decision to close the outdoor pool because it was really successful, but there was a question as to where to go from here. And there was a discussion about putting two small pools in, one in downtown Red Deer, where the recreation center is now, and one on the North Hill. And then the idea grew and ended up that we attempted to do a really comprehensive recreation and sport facility. And it didn't fly. But we ended up with it was a competition, an architectural competition, which was a rarity at the time. And we had a choice of plans that were developed by various architectural firms. And the Recreation Board, which was a volunteer facility or institution, made the choice of what to build and what not to build. And the end result was not much more than an indoor swimming pool. And then in about 1964, swimming had caught on, and the club was very active. And in due course, the decision was made to build the only Western Canada Olympic-sized pool. And it was developed along with some craft rooms. The local arts organizations had a place in this. The original library was in the basement, and it thrived quite well.
This is in the downtown rec center.
Yeah, and it reached the point where the place was overflowing. We were hiring more and more staff, people that were specialists in the arts, for example, and more support staff for some of the activities that were really thriving and doing really quite well. So the whole thing, the recreation department, gradually became more comprehensive and looked more like a community function. And that's the way that all happened.
Well, and am I remembering correctly, there were a number of tennis courts built along with it or alongside it by the Rotary Club?
Mm-hmm.
And that would have been, I guess, park number 2 after they had established the Rotary picnic park, the base of Piper Creek Hill.
Well, the whole recreation complex came about that time. And in the front was the lawn bowling, speed skating, or community skating. And eventually the Golden Circle and the library moved from the recreation center.
I remember
behind the recreation center, between the recreation center and the Westerner, was a site for a playground, and there was some sports possibilities, including the tennis, but mainly it was just a support playground for the outdoor and indoor swimming pools. I should have done a review before.
Oh, no.
Things are coming back slowly. I've been away from it for close to 40 years.
Ouch.
But that whole complex, and there got to be some interesting competition between the Westerner and the city. The decision to move the Westerner, and the name wasn't that, I forget what it was.
It was just the Red Deer exhibition grounds.
Yeah. And of course, when the arena was built, that was in about 54. And at a later time, the Kinnex was built by the exhibition people, but with an understanding that it would be accessible to the city recreation department, and they programmed it during the wintertime, and the Westerner did the rest. And then it was quite a controversial item in the community when the decision was made to move. And there were extensive meetings and a lot of debate about what should go where. And it gradually found its niche, and they did the move.
Yeah, I remember that controversy too. I'm not sure I can put a year and a date to it, but there was a long-standing attachment to the Westerner.
Mm-hmm.
I remember, as I'm sure Peter does, going down there to watch, and the chuck wagon races and whatever. I guess I'd come across it in a different sense, in that when Red Deer became a center for training troops in World War I, they were all stationed, based, I guess, tents and otherwise, down at the Westerner.
Mm-hmm.
And it really upset the community because they had to run a sewer line all the way down there, and they weren't prepared to go fund it or go into debt just to do that. However, it happened. A side story, but it just adds to the story that there was a strong attachment to the site, the location, and the activities, and all the horticultural activities that went with it. As friends of people like the McFarlands and so on. I think Ruby ran it for many years, but it was an integral part of the annual activities of the community. I can see why people didn't want, and I know why people didn't want to move it, because I can remember that argument around our kitchen table, and the family were not in favor of moving it.
Well, that brings to mind the old memorial center that was converted into what it is today. And of course, it's been expanded and improved over the years quite extensively. But that was the theater of the community. And eventually was turned over to the recreation department to operate, as was the Kinnex building.
But there was a YMCA down there, wasn't there, next to, close to the Memorial Center?
Yeah, just next door to the school.
I don't remember much about it. I just have seen comments about fundraising and stuff for it.
I remember well.
It's really close to the Catholic school.
Just east of the Waskasiu Playground.
Yeah, I mean, I know where it was located, but it obviously didn't survive. Is there a YMCA in Red Deer now?
Yeah, up in Glendale.
Yeah. So it's
Taylor Drive.
come back.
One of the battles was whether the recreation center should be turned over to a new YMCA. And McAfee, the mayor of the day, favored that. But we were very defensive. That was our baby, and we didn't want the YMCA to take it over, and we were successful in avoiding that to happen. Because in our view, the YMCA was restrictive and a little bit limited, where we could go any way we chose to fly our own kite.
Well, it fundamentally, just from its name, YM, M meaning men, was men only. And there was quite a separate organization for women, YWCA. So there was a dichotomy right from the beginning, or a limitation that would be applied to it. I mean, it's a bit of a jump, I guess, or maybe there's an intermediary facility, the DAW Center. And did it have any recreational activities attached to it other than maybe a gym? Or was it part of your department? Or was that in the public school system?
It was a joint project of the two school authorities and the recreation department. And it was developed progressively as the funds became available, so that the pool was pretty much provided by the city. A contribution was made to both school authorities to make the facility bigger and better in every sense, including sports, but also the arts. And that was my baby.
Well, the DAW Center, as I understand it, becomes a rather unique, I wouldn't call it concept, but certainly a bringing together of different parts of the community. The two schools, which didn't normally join under one, I guess, setting or one roof, and then the recreational facilities. But I've recently realized that it was some forward thinking that has led to a substantial reinvestment in that facility to substantially expand its arena capabilities and other recreational facilities, turning into, I wouldn't call it a Collicut type facility, but one that in some ways goes beyond it. And everybody then gets to use all of the facilities. I don't know whether there's a parallel to that anywhere, but there was certainly leadership and a unique initiative on the part of the school and the city to put together the Daw Center in the first place.
Have you seen it lately, the Daw Center?
It's the construction is
Tremendous expansion. Yeah.
Yeah.
That new ice sheet. It's going to be quite the facility.
I can't resist the remembering the controversy over the building of the Collicut Center, another recreational, very skilled recreational facility, and the cost overruns at the end of it, and the controversy that created. But as I vaguely recall, it was to originally cost about $23 million, came in around 27, and upset absolutely everybody. And I look at the expansion cost of the Daw alone; it's twice that, almost twice that.
Right.
There's a lot of bloodshed on the Collicut. Yeah, some really good people got shafted.
Yeah.
Well.
But
I mean, sometimes these things don't happen, or it becomes an issue. I don't say of timing, but things that you can't control, inflation being one. And there are lots of parallels to that. I can think of some ones far worse than that one. There's one in the healthcare field called the Mackenzie Center in Edmonton, and they could have built it for less than 1/10 the cost that they eventually paid for. But anyway,
staying with
there are issues that you can't resolve or can't set aside. You have to take into account.
For sure.
One of the first provincial meetings I attended was the focus was community use of schools. And it was worked over and beaten to death on every recreation meeting I ever attended. And it caught my fancy. And when I got to be president of the ARPA, we changed the shift and tried to put a little more focus on this thing. Why the hell doesn't it work?
Right.
Because it can work. And the Daw Center, and I don't know how I can resist saying this, was my baby. And the Canadian
sometimes
parks.
when something turns out to be very successful, there are a number of people who stand up and
and
are quite willing to accept some of the credit.
We had the right people in the right place, and Harold Daw and Joe Doherty were my three-way partners. And after the project was completed, it was written up all over the province, and I was sent across Canada to tell the story.
Interesting.
Oh, really?
I went to every province at the expense of the Canadian Parks and Recreation Association. But it was I have taken pride in a whole lot of things that have happened in recreation.
But that
And I'm egotistical enough to blow my own horn when I...
Fair enough, Don.
Yeah. But it was a really interesting project because nobody had any money. The school board couldn't do a thing. The Catholic school board couldn't do a thing. But the recreation department could put some seed in the ground and make a start. And when the schools were built, the city contributed a sizable amount of money to both the public school and the Catholic school. And we've got agreements that aren't being followed as closely as they should. but they were good, sound agreements between the city and the school board, both school boards. It went very well. Sorry about that.
No, I like the diversion because it's an example. It's a great example of a concept and idea that worked, and there were others interested enough to say, "Hey, come and tell us about it." And there are others that have followed it, in varying degrees, who've tried to put that same concept together. There was another thing that occurred about, I think, as Peter alluded to, that you were actively involved in 1980 with the, I guess, funding, some funding from the province, but was required to build the pathway system that we have up and down the river and beyond. You want to tell us a bit about how that came about?
Oh boy.
Sounds like it wasn't easy.
It was convoluted.
No, it wasn't hard. It wasn't hard. The city of Calgary had Fish Creek Park. City of Edmonton had Capital City Park, or whatever they called it. The smaller centers had nothing. No major support from the province. The small cities put their heads together and approached the power in Edmonton. We attended many meetings, and mainly in Edmonton, to plant the seed. But we wanted support for Red Deer, Lethbridge, Medicine Hat. Somehow or other, Grand Prairie got it, and Lloydminster. As a gang, we went to the province. There was enough interest, the politicians in each of those centers, to lend their support to it. And it happened. And we put together plans. The Planning Commission here did a very good job of addressing the Red Deer River Valley. And among the people involved in that operation were Bill Shaw and the city manager. My mind is going.
Mike Day?
Mike, no.
That was before Mike.
No, Mike was in the middle of all this. Oh dear. He just retired as city manager.
Craig Curtis?
Yeah, Craig Curtis.
Craig, yeah.
Yeah.
I was singing before Craig.
But each community was challenged with putting a proposal together that suited their particular community. Red Deer, with some really good people, put together a committee that was active and successful. And we managed to get the bulk of the money. Not the greatest percentage by far. Ours was 25 million. Conditions were ideal for that amount of money to grow, because as we completed each phase of the park, there was an amount of money put into our hands to do what we wanted with. And we were able to spend that money far more wisely than we thought was possible because of conditions. Every bid came in lower than every site lent itself to what was finally chosen. Gravel pits were changed radically in both Heritage Ranch and
Mackenzie
Great.
Trails.
Great Deep Park, and
Yeah, 3 places.
so the park is a success, for no doubt about it.
Well, I guess one of the things that struck me is that the city itself, the community itself, has fed into it. In other words, it wasn't just a strip down the river, but there's very substantial extensions of the program, making Red Deer on a whatever basis you want to use, one of the per capita in terms of paths and kilometers or miles of paths in the country. But that leads me, I guess, to the last point, and you may want to comment on this too, Peter. Where does Red Deer stand? I mean, I guess I'm somewhat biased and look upon it as having been so sensitive to recreational needs or development, and perhaps having been having the space to do it. It has a personality that is, which one of the main ingredients is just the outdoor and recreational activities you can participate in. But obviously, as we've chatted, they're not just in internal facilities; they're external ones. But it's given Red Deer a reputation. And I don't know how far and wide you've been. You were mentioning going across Canada and so on, but it's just always struck me that Red Deer was somewhat unique, if not very unique, in having those facilities available and creating a personality that in part is based on them.
Dead right. You know, what better river valley could you imagine? It's just a treasure.
Well, it's dare I say, it's like Red Deer, except for those of us who've grown up in it. It's a treasure.
No doubt.
Yeah. Is there anything you'd like to add, Peter, particularly from a recreational point of view, in terms of your work and involvement in some of the things that Don's referred to? Clearly, it's when I think of it, it's a much more multifaceted, or has become much more multifaceted program, like a very substantial one. When I think of all of the huge facilities that are now available in the community, and it takes a lot of planning, a lot of funding, and a lot of forethought to make that happen.
I just think that, and we've touched on it now, but the Red Deer River, the city, is Red Deer, named after the river, which was, there's that misnomer, Waskasiu-Sipi, which is really Elk River, but the early Scots changed it to interpret it as Red Deer, and therefore our name. But it's so nice to see the river being highlighted, thanks to the fathers of Waskasiu Park, including our special guest here. But the Red Deer River is such a valuable resource, and it's used by citizens of Red Deer and probably a huge community that's around Red Deer and associated with the Red Deer River, but both summer and winter. But it's the value as a ecosystem is so important, because just think how we depend on that river. And that connection and the emphasis on the river in our park system, I think, is so important from an ecological perspective as well as a recreational one. That we have to protect that valley, the Red Deer River Valley, from the mountains to where it empties into the South Saskatchewan. But it's having something like Waskasiu Park really helps, because it brings so many people to the river and up and down it on the bike trails, walking trails, the facilities along it, like Gates Lake Sanctuary and the Kerrywood Nature Center and Mackenzie Trails and Heritage Ranch, all these places are connected really strongly. Bower Pond's directly connected with the river, and it brings people probably to appreciate not only our recreational opportunities and potential here, but the river itself. And I just think all rivers need protection, and I think Waskesiu Park probably really helps that in that mandate. And I am very fortunate to live very close to the river and to the trail system. Before I left to come pick up Dawn, Barb took off, my wife, with our dog, and guess where they were heading? Down into the park.
Yeah, it's right below your house.
Right below the house.
Yeah. How fortunate.
Yeah.
Something to do with the right people in the right place. Dennis Cole
Yes.
went by, and the Planning Commission had an exceptional role, and really put the thing on paper, and that's what we took to Edmonton.
Dennis Cole was the city commissioner for many years and went on to become enjoy the same position for the city of Calgary, but was here for many years and used to frequent our sauna steam room quite often to argue with Dad over large and small activities, but or projects. But I well remember that his background was his first in urban design was to design a community in the middle of the desert in the Middle East, and that's how he got into what became his lifelong profession. And there are many things to attribute to him, and if one were to look back carefully into the planning of the city, whether it's the one-way streets or the Michener Hill Menace, Dennis's Menace. It's a side trip, but he certainly had a profound impact, long-standing impact, and Red Deer was very fortunate to, I guess, challenge him on one hand, but keep him on the other. Those aren't topics that people that we can, I guess, interview this day and age, but because we've lost Dennis. But I wish we could, and I hope, and I guess indirectly they're enjoying some of the appreciations that we're reflecting on in this oral history review on the work that they've done. At least they'll get some recognition from it. Well, thank you very much, both of you, for coming and sharing and giving your perspectives. It certainly gives me a new one and makes me realize how substantial the recreational facilities are in Red Deer, and a lot of it's due to your long-standing tenure as the recreational director, Don. So,
well, you're very welcome, and
thank you.
I would like to thank you in return. But it was an honor to be invited here, but especially that I would be associated with this gentleman on my right, because he's been a major part of my life.
Well, that's pretty nice to say, Peter.
I suppose.
And I know about all those Parsons, and I know about all the Waddells, and I know about Mother
Sadie.
So what a doll. She was my helper on the swim deck at 6 o'clock in the morning.
That would be Mother.
Yeah.
But that's what it took in the family to, I think of people like Bruno Comas.
Yes.
In his success in speed skating, and some of those successes that Red Deer students, youth, and so on have had way beyond Red Deer, and of course it's occurring again.
Speed skating.
Yeah.
Well, with Mr. Comas too, yeah.
There were some really good movies put together during the development and after.
Well, and maybe we have, because the facilities are all here and the people are here, we have more of that to look forward to. I hope that turns out to be true.
Fort Norno was one that really impressed me. And had
Yeah,
some,
you're right. That's another river story.
Yes, very much so.
some old timers were interviewed on that one.
I must look for that. Well, thank you both, and thank you very much. Don, do say hello to Glenn for me. I miss him at Rotary Club. There's a little story I'll tell you about Glenn afterwards, but him moving out to BC is a bit of a loss, but just tells me how much talent there is in your family.